Hey everyone, I'm Marlie Hall. Welcome to the show that covers the culture like no other. Joining us today, a panel of experts to give us their unfiltered opinions. We have screenwriter Bonsu Thompson, Shamira Ibrahim, journalist and political commentator, and music journalist Steve Preezy Brown. Thank you so much for joining us. A number of trending topics to cover today, so let's jump right into it. We start on a musical note. The Grammy nominations were just announced, and next year's award ceremony could be a historic night for Black performers.
I just took a DNA test, turns out I'm 100% that bitch.
First-time Grammy nominee Lizzo is proving that she is, in fact, 100% that bitch. She leads the way with 8 Grammy nods, including Best New Artist.
Can't nobody tell me nothing.
You can't tell him nothing. Rapper Lil Nas X is also up for Best New Artist, and his ride down Old Town Road is far from over. He's up for 6 Grammy Awards, the second most nominations this year. Rapper DaBaby is having a big year as well. He got his first Grammy nomination for Best Rap Performance, and rapper Nipsey Hussle scored 3 posthumous nominations, including Best Rap Song. So, you guys, we've seen all of this before. We have a ton of nominations when they're announced, but when you get right down to it, to the award ceremony, we get snubbed. There's never as many awards as there are nominations, not even close. So, at this point, what do we do here?
I go into every year not expecting much from the Grammys. You know, I mean, I don't feel like they're our award show. You know, they do their best to get it right, but essentially you're looking at a group of older Caucasian folks, you know, trying to give awards to our culture, and it's just never going to go right. So, I mean, I don't think you should really expect it to be completely accurate. You just have to hope for, you know, the folks who do get it that they actually deserve.
So these older Caucasian folks, do they just not relate to our music, or is there something more at play here?
I just think they're out of touch with the culture, you know? I mean, even something like, you know, Nas X has a record of the year, but he's not nominated for Song of the Year. You know, you can say Old Town Road, really the catalyst for that song's greatness is its lyrics. It's motivational. It's speaking about not letting societal boxes, you know, cage you in. It's persevering despite your obstacles. It's really about the lyricism of that song. The beat is cool, but it's about the lyricism. So to give it to, you know, the production and not the lyrics shows that you're not completely in touch with why that song is great.
Mm-hmm. So Preezy, are you down with this mainstream recognition that the Grammy provides?
Not really. I don't think that it's like a really needed for the culture to be valuable. I think that the culture needs to find its own institutions, build its own institutions, so that like we have more informed people making these decisions, so we don't feel excluded or feel like we got the short hand of the rope when you have outsiders making the decisions, because you can't really expect somebody who doesn't know the culture to really make the right decisions. But with that said, this year I think it's a good chance that somebody from the African American community will bring home some hardware. You have in the record of the year category, you have 3 African American artists. You have Lizzo, you have her, and you have Lil Nas X, and all of them had big songs. Lil Nas X broke a record for most weeks at #1, so I think he has a very good chance of winning it. But overall, I don't think that people should get up in arms.
Right, you think this is not for us?
I wouldn't say not for us. It would be good to like accept it, because like you want to have like music's universal, so you want to have people from all parts of the world like be a fan of it. But I don't think that people should bank on it or really put it as the end all be all.
Yeah, I don't think it's for us. You know, I think we're guests here, you know, and we appreciate to be guests here, but I don't think this is actually for us. It's not like, you know, like the Soul Train Awards, which is why you know, Ari Lennox had such an issue with losing to Lizzo, which I thought was nonsense. You know, Lizzo was very much a soulful artist. But, you know, we hold Soul Train Awards dear to us because that was a part of our Black history, part of our culture. Right. You know, that was specifically created to represent us and award us, you know, whereas the Grammys is really not for us. We were an afterthought, and we were kind of let in, so, you know. Understand what it is. Just understand what the culture and DNA is.
Not to like cut you off, but with the Ari Lennox situation, you had people saying that Lizzo didn't deserve it,
right?
Because like she was more pop, right? And then that brings apart with like who's picking what, right? And then they try to pigeonhole that with Black music, so it's kind of skewed with that, and you know that's it.
Let's talk Nipsey Hussle for a second. Yeah. He historically has not gotten much Grammy love, but this year 3 nominations. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I think he has a high chance of getting that award, at least one award this year, especially from a posthumous perspective. Last year, he did get a Grammy nomination for Victory Lap, I believe. So I do think it's a very high chance that, at least for Best Rap Performance, he's going to get the win for that. I think he's up against some competition like Cardi B's performance, and there's a pretty strong chance he's going to come out the winner on that end. Yeah.
But had this award not been posthumous, do you think he would have gotten this Grammy love?
Probably not, frankly. I think Victory Lap was, he had been putting out a lot of content prior to Victory Lap. He had The Marathon Continues. He had been doing a lot of stuff locally in Los Angeles, and a lot of his loyalty and a lot of his fan base is very local and very regional. A lot of his posthumous love, even for people who are now very vocal fans of his, are people who are rediscovering his music posthumously, right? Looking at his old mixtapes, looking at his old content. A lot of his local love has always been there. It's been very strong and very loyal. But from a national perspective, especially from the perspective of the Academy, which, yes, does have people who are part of ASCAP and BMI who are Black and young producers and writers, is overwhelmingly older people who are not consuming his content. So I really don't think that's the way that they would be consuming it. I think overwhelmingly, if you look at the genres of music from a Black perspective, and I know we're just looking at hip hop and R&B, the way that we stratify our content in the Grammys is not structured to look at Black content the way that we look at Black content. So we're looking at hip hop and R&B, but think of the genre of world music, right? World music just condenses essentially Afro beats and all sorts of world music into just one genre to have 5 entries, right? You have reggae, and reggae is really dancehall, soca, and calypso, right? And that's not really reggae, but we'll see Machel Montana and the same as coffee, right? Even though they're 2 completely different types of diaspora music, but it doesn't really matter to the people in the Academy, right? Even though for people who consume that content, we know that those are 2 different parties that you would go to, right?
Right.
And
different audience bases.
Exactly. So really just realizing that and recognizing that, I think really kind of comes to a recognition that it's really not for us, or the people who are evaluating these content bases and classifying them are really not considering who the audiences are, right? And I think going back to the Ari Lennox point, I think part of the resentment there, whether or not it's valid, and I do think it was kind of overblown to really go as hard at Lizzo as some people did, was that people perceive that Lizzo is more marketable to a Grammy audience than Ari Lennox would be, right?
Which even if that's the truth, that still doesn't make her less soulful.
It's still disingenuous to put it the way that it was.
Beyonce is very much, she's the biggest pop artist in the world, and you can't say she's not soulful. So that argument makes absolutely no sense if you're going to be a Beyonce fan as well.
Right.
So speaking of Beyonce, though, The Gift, what do you make of that?
That feels like we don't want any problems with Beyonce. So we're going to give her her look. I don't think she has a chance to win, but I just feel like you have to. They understand the powers that be, and the Grammy, though they're still the high and mighty Grammy entity that they are. They're a little weathered, and they don't really want too much smoke right now. So I feel like you have to give it up to either Jay or Queen Bee. So.
But best pop vocal, though, isn't it? It feels a little like Afrobeat.
Yeah. Well, beyond it feeling a little like Afrobeat, it's also a lot of West African artists plus 1 or 2 South African artists featuring Beyonce. So it's a very specious way to approach giving her a nomination. Understood why it's been done, especially tied to such a big, Disney project and all the backing behind it, all the support behind it. There was a bit of a greater, conflicting discussion within the African diaspora about whether or not there should have been a greater range of artists instead of just Nigerian and Ghanaian and 1 or 2 South African, because they always have 1 or 2 South African artists. But it also feels like, who are you celebrating, for this album? Are you celebrating Beyonce because she had the ability to cater and pick and select, a lot of the biggest artists coming out of the West African music scene, or is it the artists who actually produced the content that made the songs the way they are?
I think that's why it got, pop recognition, because it's global. Afrobeat, African music is worldwide music, right? It's not really
genre too. You got Justin Bieber dabbling, and then you got major artists.
And
Drake,
Rihanna. It's not just music that's relegated to just the African continent. It's really global. You hear African music, whether it's Afrobeat, whatever. You can hear African music on every single continent. So it is essentially one of the biggest pop records.
So Preezy, any obvious snubs for you? Anybody who did not get a nomination that you felt should have?
As for the hip hop community, maybe Ari Lennox in some of the R&B, categories. Speaking of her, because her album Shea Butter Baby, it was one of the more acclaimed. It got positive reviews across the board. It got a lot of love. So that was kind of shocking. But other than that, not off the top.
I guess I don't want to say snub, because I'm not necessarily totally surprised, but for a year and last year and a half, that has been so dynamic for so many women in rap. To see a rap album or best new rap artist to be so devoid of women in rap. And it can be, we've gone beyond the Cardi and the Nicki, we have Rico Nasty, we have Megan Thee Stallion, we have Dream Doll, we have Asian Doll, we have so many different local, no name. I mean, it can go on and on and on about the names that are local, national, have broken across the board with projects. And some of it is the politics about cutoff dates for sure, but some of it is just about how people realize how these artists are breaking into people's purview, which is not necessarily by traditional mainstream machines. They're not necessarily going by the traditional approach of attaching themselves to labels immediately. It's kind of a little frustrating to see that none of them are really getting that much attention on this field, right? Not necessarily particularly surprising, especially since it took a long fight to even get them so much as recognized on the XXL freshman list. So to expect the Grammys to recognize it is, a big ask, but that's one of the things that kind of stood out.
Speaking of women, Rhapsody had a nice album too.
Exactly.
Rhapsody had a
And
nice
Rhapsody
album this year.
She was really hurt by not being nominated.
Right.
And I mean, I thought Rhapsody's album was really impressive, but it felt more of like an attempt really for more marketing wise than it felt, and I really felt the music. I felt like it was so much about the theme, it kind of like overshadowed how good the music was. I think that held her back, but this was definitely a better album than her previous album. And even going back to Ari Lennox, I love Shea Butter Baby. I love that album. I was a little surprised and taken aback by her response because while I love that album, I'm aware that it didn't have the impact that I think she felt it had. And I'm like, is there a disconnect here, or is just like, are you just hurt because you didn't get?
But again, with that though, that's a double standard sometimes with the genres, because like sometimes it's been albums that we never heard of that win like album of the year, or that like the average consumer didn't hear about. Like maybe like Bon Iver is he's a known entity in his genre, but like for the average fan, you don't know who Bon Iver is. Right. And just like Ari Lennox is a known entity in her genre.
But I mean, but even to that regard, I love that album, and I feel like every week I'm introducing somebody of color to that album. So I feel like even specifically with whether it's people of color, I think they're still ignorant to the album, and I feel like if you're still ignorant to your direct demo, and I think you still have some work to do. This is nothing to take away from that album. It's a beautiful album. Love her voice, love her performance, but for her to be so devastated by that, I felt like was a little premature. Like, this was your first album. It usually doesn't even work like that. Even if it was, Good Kid, Mad City, right? Kendrick's first technically, big studio album, and like that's one of the greatest hip hop albums to me of all time. That didn't get the love. To Pimp got the love because they were late, and that's what the Grammys does. The Grammys is always going to be an album late. So to feel like the Soul Train didn't give you what you're supposed to get, I don't know. It threw me off a little bit.
I feel like you guys can talk about this all day long. So the Grammys will be live in LA on January 26th. Alicia Keys will return as host for the second straight year, and I hope it's a big night for the culture. So up next, it's like the series Dear White People has come to life at Syracuse University. We'll discuss the troubling behavior that has an entire community on edge after the break. Welcome back. A hostile environment for students of color is brewing at Syracuse University, and it came to a boil when a white supremacist manifesto was anonymously sent to students' phones. There have been at least 10 racist incidents in the past 2 weeks alone, including swastikas, vulgar graffiti, and verbal attacks. The hate crimes are becoming so frequent that students have been sitting in for a week now. They presented a list of demands to the administrators. Here's what one student who did not want to be identified says they want. Take a listen.
We're not asking the university to solve the issue of systemic racism because we understand that the university can't stop students from acting out and doing things like this, but making our experience as comfortable and normal as possible.
So the university has agreed to a few of their demands. Here's how the Syracuse chancellor responded. Listen.
It is the collective responsibility of our fraternities and our whole university to reflect on how to prevent this very troubling behavior in the future.
So he said reflect, which blows my mind. I mean, the whole situation blows my mind. But the fact that he's responding to this by let's reflect is asinine to me, because it seems like there is a powder keg situation going on that campus. I can't even imagine being a student there, a Black student, and having to witness these sit-ins, being subject to some of the racist behavior that's taking place on campus in this day and age. I mean, the stress alone of being a student at university, being a Black student, and we know the climate that we live in with so many school shootings happening, and then you add this to it, it's like it makes you almost not want to go to school.
That's why they're not going. They're not going to class. And actually, I want to commend the faculty, really. That they're really supporting the students, and professors are cutting classes, giving verbal statements saying that it's not a safe environment. So I really want to commend the student body. Number one, they're also resisting in their way, holding sit-ins, protesting, but also sometimes you can just you stop with just the marching, right, and that's it. But they're actually you have in conjunction with the faculty, they're actually putting together items that are making the university responsible to adhere at a certain point, with actionable items that can really erode this terrible culture that they're having. I want to commend the student body as well as the faculty for going hand in hand. The students, sometimes they're left alone to fight for their, we can see this in Black history. It's like UCLA and Angela Davis. Like sometimes you have these students that are left to fight for their own, but they don't have any support from the faculty. And I think coming together is the only way you're going to have change, because you need somebody in the building, in those offices, holding the chancellor accountable for what's going on, and saying not only is this a problem, but this is the way to solve it, and you need to work with us. So.
Mm-hmm. And this list of demands address diversity issues, diversity trainings, no consequences for people participating in the sit-ins, creating an open forum for students. I mean, these seems like very basic things that should be instituted anyway. And this is on their list of demands. I find that really sad.
Yeah, that is really disheartening, and it's real disheartening that it took 11 incidents for the chancellor even to step up. And it was actually days after, I think, or it was a long period of time before he even came out with a quote or a statement or anything. And he's kind of calmed down this, we need to go over things. No, you need to take immediate action, as Governor Cuomo said. You need to take immediate action and immediately get in on this. And I read that one of the fraternities, Alpha Chi Rho, I don't know if I have that correct, but one of them was suspended. Why weren't they expelled on the spot?
Right, expelled. They should have
for
been
hate speech. That should go against university policy. That shouldn't have no tolerance for that. So that's a question off top.
I think it's important to try to contextualize the scale of what's been happening versus the ask. Their asks are really minuscule, and I'm not saying that to minimize what they're asking for, but I'm saying what they're asking for versus what they're denying them and what's been happening to these kids. The last alleged incident that happened was the distribution of a manifesto. That manifesto was directly tied to the Christchurch shootings. For people who don't remember what the Christchurch shootings were, that happened in New Zealand, where they bombed 2 mosques in the middle of Jumu'ah prayer. So Jumu'ah prayer, for those who aren't Muslim, I was raised Muslim, I am Muslim. It's one of the most holy prayers in the week. In the middle of Friday, a lot of people who are very, very observant will actually take the entire day off and go to that prayer. So it's a very heavily attended service. It happened last year in March. So to connect that manifesto to that incident, and I know a lot of people don't like to connect the Black community to the Muslim community. It's obviously actually very heavily connected in this country. One of our preeminent congresswomen in this country is a Black Muslim congresswoman, Ilhan Omar, who has been subject to really heavy amounts of scrutiny and attacks and heavy amounts of death threats, to the point that the FBI has had to scrutinize her. So these things are very real threats that they're not taking to that level of scrutiny and severity that they should be taking, right? It's a very real threat and fear level for people who are walking around day to day, right? So just to ask for, we need sensitivity, we need diversity, we need action, we need people to show that they care. That's base level empathy for people who are walking around with real associative threats of death, right? Day to day, just to try to go to class. To really go to a school that's supposed to afford them the only means of attaining some sort of class mobility in this country, right? So they're doing this at the risk of their lives, and that's what's really happening to them. And the institution of academia around them is just saying, well, we're going to hope that this gets better. That's a completely unacceptable level of passivity here.
Absolutely. 22,000 kids on that campus. I feel like the time for reflection is over. It seems like a time for serious action.
I feel like I think we need to start looking at these factions and white supremacy as a whole as terrorism. I mean, you have all the elements there. I mean, they're using social media and propaganda. I mean, before they commit these atrocities, they're telling you to subscribe to, anti-Semites. I mean, like, see what this is, right? This is not, there's a vertebrae between these actions. Like, there's a culture being created. This is terrorism. So for you to, to have strong views against like ISIS, and you have terrorists in your own soil land, I mean, it seems like your priorities are a little mixed up,
Then I think the DPS said that it wasn't a direct threat as of yet. But what kind of? What is not a direct
they said
threat?
There's no specific threat. I mean, it's clearly brown people who other than whites. There's a clear direct, like it's very clear. So it also baffled me the way that the police were the campus police were responding. Right, I felt like the chancellor was late, but then I think the Cuomo brought on the FBI, and they're supposed to be working in conjunction with the university police, but the university police seemed lost. We don't have a direct threat here. We don't there's clearly a common thread between the people who are being oppressed. Like there are Jews, right? Asians, blacks being called nigger, swastikas. I mean, come on now.
Yeah, and it's contradictory because they're saying there's no threat, but let's bring in the FBI.
Right.
Why?
Exactly. And I mean, and Cuomo's also being contradictory because he's saying, he puts his nose up and he's criticizing the chancellor and saying his actions are a little too slow and this behavior is reprehensible. And I'm like, but you're the governor of New York. You're also the governor of New York City in the police department. So I'm like, now you're contradicting. Oh, okay. So now you want to have a heavy hand when it comes to enforcement on Syracuse University. Why is that?
That's a high budget button topic, and because it's headlines and it's in the national radar now.
Yeah. But because it's an Ivy League school, or because brown people in those communities are not as important. I mean, that's what it says, especially because it's Syracuse University. And I'm like, super contradictory. So,
Shamira, what do we do about this?
I think there's a few things that are, moving forward. We need to stop looking from a culture of being reactive and start looking at both being descriptive and prescriptive. And we don't ever really look at these situations that way and stop being afraid of defining things up front. I think when it comes to identifying conflicts, identifying really, really hard situations, being able to feel comfortable with labeling them what they are up front, and then standing back and saying, how do we actually prescribe the actual next steps, right? I thought we would have learned that lesson around 2016, and considering the stagnancy of journalism when around the time of those elections, it seems that we need to learn that lesson over and over again. Hopefully that doesn't come at the cost of people's lives or people's livelihood or health or safety. It really, really would be tragic if that would have to be the lesson that had to be learned here for people to actually correct themselves. But it's one of those things that we can call something what it is, take the steps to move forward, and actually listen to the young people who have to experience the things day to day, instead of having to look at it from a state of removal and say, oh, I actually think this is what it is. People who are experiencing the things that they have to do just to go around day to day, those feelings are valid, and what they're reporting is valid, especially when it's reported in mass.
Well, I certainly hope that something concrete and significant is done before we're reporting something more tragic happening on campus. So coming up, Ben Carson is a retired brain surgeon, but he may not be right in the head. We'll talk about the beef he's starting with Maxine Waters, of all people. See you after the break. Welcome back. When it comes to black men who support Trump, Ben Carson is second only to Kanye, and the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development stood up for the president in a major way. He fired off an angry letter to Maxine Waters. Carson dragged the 15-term Congresswoman for criticizing Trump about the nation's homelessness problem. Here's just some of the disrespectful letter he sent to Auntie Maxine. It started like a bad version of the dozens when he mentioned mothers. It went something like this, quote, "My mother always taught me that people should not throw rocks, especially while they live in a glass house." And here's the worst part of it, quote, basic manners elude you. And it seems that instead of producing results, you're more interested in producing cheap headlines at the president's expense, like a true career politician. So I'll say this, she is a true career politician in the best possible way. She's been in elected office for more than 40 years. And secondly, she did not come for him. She came for the president, but he felt the need to respond. So we all know that Maxine Waters is like the master of the clap back. So if you were her, how would you clap back?
I'm trying to find a witty way to say what I have to say as opposed to an actual rant as to what I have to
I'll
say.
take it any way it comes.
I'm just very amused that he has the retort of saying a career politician as someone who is completely unqualified for the position he has and has actually hired a series of completely unqualified people. There was a report that came out that like half of the people he's hired don't even have bachelor's degrees in any sort of field, much less urban planning, urban development whatsoever, right? So for someone to use that as a bar, whether or not you believe that, the politics of DC needs to be reformed or not, it's like, well, you don't even know what you're doing there. People are suing you, like literally right now for actual poor allocation of funds. So focus on your own home before you're actually throwing something at somebody else's glass house.
Right.
You also had aspirations of being a politician. What are you talking about? How are you going to use that as a jab when that's something that you failed at? It was a goal of yours that you failed at, but now you're using it as if like that's something that's negative.
Just projecting.
But that's clearly politics, right? Like politicians, people who run for office like to do the whole, well, I'm an average Joe, not like this career politicians. I just went to Harvard and Yale and, actually did all this work and was doing all this advocacy and then did this elected position and got nominated for this and now I want to run for president. But I'm a regular person, not like everybody else who was in office for 25 years, right? As if that makes you more relatable than the average person. It doesn't make you any more relatable, right? To the average American who's been doing everything else that they do in their lives any other day, right? So it's not a matter of the has and the have-nots, even when they want to position it as any sort of thing like that. Because anytime he goes to any sort of, urban development, any urban housing, whenever he tries to go to NYCHA and people sit there and protest and say, you don't do anything for NYCHA, which they do because I grew up in colonial houses and anytime he's gone around, believe me, it's a problem. But, it's just, it really flies in the face of anything he claims to argue for.
Right. He might want to stick to surgery.
Exactly.
Preezy, what's your clap back?
Well, he's like the guy Steven in the movie Django. And then, President Trump is, the slave master. Like, it's like a Stockholm syndrome. But basically, I read the letter, and then Maxine Waters, she was just basically being auntie, checking him like, look, Trump, like, we need answers. This is what, like, I want you to do. We need to line up and this and that. Like,
Which is her job.
Yeah, that's her job to do, is to seek for
he was
these
accusing
answers.
her of not doing. That's the funny part.
Yeah, that's her job. And then for him to go and take, petty barbs, basically, taking the side of the president is just like insane, basically. And just the manner in which he did it, it's crazy.
Well, I want to hear Auntie Maxine's clap back, that's for sure. Well, that's all for today. I want to thank my guests, Bonsu, Shamira, and Preezy for joining us. And thank you for sharing their commentary. I always mess it up at the end. And thank you for watching. I'm Marlie. See you next time.